The glass doors hissed shut behind them, sealing the scent of artificial sugar and ozone inside. Via, Lemon, Lone X, and Nya stood at the threshold. It was not a cafe. It was a sprawling, multi-level labyrinth of neon-lit slides and towering animatronic stages that stretched for blocks. Above them, the ceiling vanished into a haze of flickering lights and suspended tracks. Every surface hummed with a low-frequency vibration. They moved forward, but the scale of the place felt suffocating. Massive plastic sculptures loomed over the walkways, their painted faces frozen in permanent grins. Nya stopped, looking up at a series of catwalks that crisscrossed the rafters like a spiderweb. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of scorched sugar. Lone X kept his hand near his belt, scanning the shadows. There was no sound of customers, only the rhythmic, mechanical clicking of gears turning. They were walking through a hollowed-out machine designed to look like a playground. Every step echoed against the polished floor. The palace was watching them. Via tightened her grip on her gear, sensing that the exit was already a world away. The labyrinth was beginning to shift. Via broke away from the group, her eyes locked on a heavy steel door tucked behind a giant hollow plastic sundae. It was marked Security Office in faded, peeling paint. She reached the door, pried the handle, and slipped inside. The room was a stark contrast to the neon chaos outside, bathed in the cold, flickering blue glow of dozens of monitors. She moved to the central console and tapped the keyboard. A directory of files flooded the screen. She selected the primary animatronic schematics. 4 blueprints flickered to life: a polar bear, an owl, a rhino, and a horse. Each diagram detailed complex internal wiring. As she scrolled through the data, she noticed red error warnings pulsing rhythmically across the code. This was manually injected, corrupted data. The lines of code were jagged, intentionally broken. Via realized the entire facility was a trap, and the animatronics were being primed. She reached for her radio, her fingers trembling against the plastic casing, and signaled the others to move toward her position. Lemon burst into the security office, her boots skidding on the linoleum. She clutched a modified VR headset, its wires trailing behind her like a severed nerve. Via pointed to the central terminal, her hands already dancing across the interface to clear a path for the connection. Lemon didn't hesitate. She slammed the headset's primary cable into the mainframe port. A shower of sparks erupted from the socket, stinging the air. The monitors flickered, the blue light turning a sickly, unstable violet. Lemon pulled the headset over her eyes and slumped into the chair. Via watched the data streams, her fingers flying across the keys to stabilize the connection. She input the override codes, forcing the terminal to accept the link. A progress bar appeared on the main screen, a thin white line beginning to crawl across the bottom of the display. It was slow, agonizingly so. Every percentage point gained caused the room to vibrate. The walls groaned, as if the entire building was straining. Lemon's breathing became shallow. The progress bar hit 40. The hum of the facility deepened into a low, guttural roar. There was no turning back now. The system had locked them in. The progress bar surged, the white lines snapping to the end of the frame. 100%. The hum in the walls cut out instantly, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. Then, the monitors in the security office surged, with a violent, jagged, crimson light. Every screen displayed the same image, a pulsing, blood-red eye. Across the main hall, the animatronics jerked. Their heads snapped upward in perfect, terrifying unison. Their eyes ignited with the same predatory glow, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. The polar bear was the first to move. It didn't walk, it lunged. The heavy glass partition separating the main stage from the lobby exploded inward. The machine landed on the polished floor with a deafening thud. It let out a sound that was half hydraulic whine and half mechanical screech. Its claws, sharpened steel hooks, dragged across the floor, carving deep, jagged furrows into the concrete. The hunt had begun. Lone X and Nya didn't wait for the machines to close the distance. They sprinted toward the service counter, sliding behind the reinforced steel barrier. just as the rhino erupted from the shadows. The floor bucked under the weight of the charging machine. Its heavy frame hit a decorative pillar, sending chunks of plaster raining down like shrapnel. Nya leveled her weapon, firing a rapid burst that sparked harmlessly against the rhino's reinforced plating. The machine didn't even flinch. It lowered its head, the blunt metal horn aimed directly at their position. Lone X lunged forward, grabbing Naya by the shoulder, and dragging her behind a heavy vending machine as the rhino slammed into the counter. The impact was bone-jarring. Metal groaned and buckled, the entire structure twisting under the force of the collision. Sparks showered the room, lighting up the dark hall in rhythmic, blinding flashes. Lone X fired again, aiming for the joints in the rhino's neck. But the machine swiped a massive claw, tearing through the counter like it was made of paper. They were trapped. The polar bear was closing in from the left, its heavy footsteps shaking the floorboards. Naya scrambled backward, her heels scraping against the debris-strewn floor. Inside the security office, Via watched the chaos unfold through the wall of monitors. The feed from the main hall flickered with static as the animatronics tore through the structure. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the source of the corruption. She bypassed the primary firewalls, her eyes scanning lines of rapidly scrolling green text. A hidden partition caught her attention, labeled with a stark, singular tag. Incident Log 1. She paused, her hand hovering over the enter key. The air in the small room felt thin, heavy, with the scent of overheated electronics. She clicked. A grainy, high-contrast video file expanded to fill the central screen. The frame showed the owner standing over a technician in a sterile, white-walled workshop. The owner's face was a mask of cold, calculated fury. He reached out, his hand hovering over a large, industrial-grade remote trigger. With a sharp, sudden motion, he slammed the button down. The sound of tearing metal and the technician's muffled cry cut through the room. Via gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles turning white. The malice in the code wasn't a glitch. It was a blueprint of the man's own cruelty. It was a crime, and the evidence was burning through the system. Lemon plunged into the virtual mainframe, her consciousness tethered to the terminal by a thin, glowing data cable. The digital realm was a chaotic landscape of shifting geometry and pulsing red light. Ahead, the malware manifested as towering, jagged pillars of obsidian code, vibrating with a low, dissonant frequency that rattled her senses. She raised her digital blade, the edge shimmering with a sharp, white light. She lunged at the nearest pillar, but the code lashed out, a whip of corrupted data that forced her to pivot and parry. She stepped inside the guard, her blade carving a clean arc through the center of the pillar. The structure groaned, a sound like grinding metal, before it shattered into 1,000 shards of harmless static. Instantly, the effect rippled out into the physical world. In the main hall, the polar bear, mid-swipe, suddenly locked its joints and shuddered violently. It stumbled, its heavy paws scraping uselessly against the floor as its crimson eyes dimmed to a flickering, uncertain orange. The rhino, poised to charge again, lost its momentum and slumped forward, its head hitting the floor with a dull, heavy thud. Lone X and Naya seized the second of stillness. They scrambled away from the debris, gasping for air, their eyes locked on the faltering machines. The tide of the fight had shifted. The beasts were no longer unstoppable engines of destruction. They were struggling to maintain their hold on reality. Lemon did not wait for the machines to recover. She sprinted across the shifting digital floor, her blade trailing a wake of white light. 3 pillars remained, pulsing with a rhythmic, violent energy that threatened to tear her connection apart. She swung, shattering the second pillar, but the system retaliated instantly. A wave of corrupted data surged forward, a wall of jagged black static designed to crush her. She dove through a gap in the code, her hand grazing the freezing surface of the final anchor. She planted her feet, channeled her remaining energy into the blade, and drove it deep into the core. The pillar groaned, a sound that echoed through the entire facility, before fracturing into brilliant, harmless light. The malware dissolved, bleeding away into nothingness. In the main hall, the effect was instantaneous. The polar bear, mid-lunge, froze as if struck by a sudden paralysis. The rhino slumped, its heavy frame hitting the floor with a final, echoing thud. The violent crimson glow in their eyes flickered once, then vanished, replaced by a dull, lifeless gray. The mechanical roar died out, leaving only the sound of heavy, ragged breathing. Via did not hesitate. Her fingers moved with precision across the keyboard, isolating the incident log, one file. She dragged the video evidence into the upload queue, targeting the local police server. The progress bar crawled forward, a thin line of green against the dark monitor. She watched the percentage climb until the screen flashed a confirmation. Transmission complete. A moment later, the distant wail of sirens cut through the heavy silence of the building. The sound grew rapidly, shifting from a faint hum to a deafening roar. As multiple cruisers screeched to a halt outside the main entrance, heavy boots thundered against the floorboards. Officers swept through the complex, their flashlights cutting through the dim, dessert-themed decor. Via watched from the security office as they breached the owner's private quarters. The owner was dragged out, his hands bound in metal cuffs, the remote trigger still clutched in his grip. He did not fight. He only stared at the floor as they led him toward the exit. With the threat neutralized, the group gathered in the center of the main hall. The animatronics remained motionless on their stages, their internal gears silent for the first time in hours. The air still carried the faint, cloying scent of sugar, but the underlying tension had evaporated. Lone X leaned against a counter. Nya holstered her weapon, and Lemon pulled the headset from her eyes, blinking in the sudden clarity of the room. They stood together in the quiet, watching the machines.